Hello and welcome to the Pod Sound School podcast that aims to help improve your podcast and gets into the lifestyle and struggles of podcasters. This is your host, Veronica.
And I'm Studio Steve, and we're here to teach you all the skills and show you the tools you need to create a podcast that people will go crazy about.
On this episode, we'll be talking about how our podcast led us into building our coaching business and growing our community. We'll be sharing some of the things we did to turn our podcast into a business and the steps we had to go through to switch our mindset from content creators to entrepreneurs. So if you're new to podcasting or have been podcasting for a while and are wondering how you can start thinking about your podcast in terms of a business, this episode is for you.
And before we get into the episode, don't forget to come and say hi on Instagram or Twitter at Pod Sound School. And if you haven't yet, to join our community on Facebook, Podcasting for Bosses. Okay, so let's dive in. So these are some of the things we did from the beginning of our journey as podcasters that helped us to turn our side hustle or our podcast into a business.
Number one, we invested time and money in having a high quality podcast from the beginning. And I understand that we had the upper hand because we had an audio engineer. Studio Steve is an audio engineer, and he already had the skills and then the equipment.
Yeah, and that's a big thing.
Fancy microphones.
Yeah, that's a big expense, and we can't all get started with a few $1,000s to start with. We have to start with a USB microphone. But even with the USB microphone, you can make a big difference in learning how microphones work, checking that your room sounds good, investing in some curtains that go into your room, and just investing in yourself. And that is the biggest thing, is we weren't afraid to invest in ourselves. It was a risk, and we knew going into it that, you know, it might not ever pay off, but we felt inclined and we just went for it.
Yeah, and it's still so surprising to me how there are many podcasters that think that audio isn't important. That you can just get by with, you know, I'm going to say the word shitty audio.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case in podcasting, especially if you want your podcast to go to places.
Yeah, and there's two components really with that. One is your microphones, your microphone technique, your preamps, your DAW or your audio interface, right? But then also the editing. And I'm always surprised, and we listen to hundreds of podcasts, how little editing most podcasters do, the majority of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, taking out all your uhs and ums or long pauses, adding a little bit of music or some sound effects or getting creative with segments, things like that is a really great way to make your podcast stand out and to make it one that's really addicting to people.
Yeah, it's all about the listener's experience.
And so there we're talking about two different things, which is money and time. And time is money. Time's probably more valuable than the money that you spend on the microphones, right? So put that value, put that time, invest that time into it. And that's why if we hadn't had Studio Steve, I know for certain we would have outsourced our editing.
Yeah.
Because without somebody, it takes a long time to get as fast at editing as I am. And as, you know, I can do it about hour per hour right now, 1-to-1 ratio. But many people don't have 3 or 4 hours per week, per episode to put into editing their podcast. So you should outsource it. And podcast editing is very affordable, and especially if you look at your time as being valuable. I mean, how much would you say ultimately you should make an hour? You know, and hopefully it's more than you're making an hour now, because you're worth a lot. We're all worth a lot. It should be hundreds of dollars an hour. So one of your hours is very valuable, and all the time that maybe a podcast editor might be taking that off of your hands is time that you could put into market research and content planning and making a better podcast.
Yeah, and it's pretty sad that some people wait until they are into their podcast recording into, you know, 2 years, 3 years into podcasting to realize that they should have done that sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, the moment you realize that podcasting is for you, that you want to keep podcasting, in that moment you should invest in learning the skills, getting the gear, or outsourcing.
Yeah. And then the other thing, as far as time and money and having high quality podcasts from the beginning, is high quality content.
Oh, yeah, that's my jam.
Yeah, and actually, to go along with our little preface at the first of this, we didn't know what we were doing there either until we didn't really start doing market research for a long time.
No.
We had no idea who our ideal listener was.
We were asking around a little bit.
We were
talking to podcasters.
Our ideal listener was podcasters, right? We wanted to help them get better sound. So it kind of, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, you kind of have an idea of who your ideal listener is because it's like a version of yourself.
And chances are is you.
Yeah, it's a lot like you or people like you. But yeah, we didn't do any market research or run surveys or do anything like that to find out what our audience needed. And so that really, I think, was hurting our content and everything. So, and then keyword research too.
Yeah, that's very important for...
And wouldn't you say once we started implementing that stuff that we saw a big difference?
Well, yes, definitely. Definitely we did. And we really got into market research not too long ago when we were planning about launching our first podcasting program.
Yeah, and
the feedback that we got out of our market research and our surveys and talking to people, it was so valuable.
It was valuable. It was priceless, really. And that's something, again, that so many podcasters, they get 100 episodes into it and they've never ran a survey or really done any market research. They're just podcasting for themselves to this sort of vague idea of what their ideal listener is, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that was number one.
Let's move on to number two.
Yeah, so we invested time and money in having a high quality podcast from the beginning.
Let's do some sound effects with these headers. I'll take this next one.
Okay.
Number 2, we adapted and expanded to other platforms.
Oh boy. So what we did is that we created a YouTube channel even before we launched our podcast.
Yes.
Right?
Because
we started recording the Pod Sound School podcast and we discovered that there were a lot of audio fundamentals and principles that we were not able to explain and to communicate well only through audio. We needed graphics and we needed video in order for us to do a better job at teaching.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we decided to start the Pod Sound School YouTube channel. And we started with animated characters.
Yes, because, and that was totally my idea, is actually out of repurposing. Because it was thinking, how can I take our podcast episodes and immediately turn them into a video that's something more than an audiogram? Because those audiograms don't perform very well on YouTube. And so then was born the animated Studio Steve and Veronica. And we also animated a robot character sidekick.
Yeah, but I remember there was this night that we were trying to record a video, our intro video for our YouTube channel. So it was us, it wasn't our animated characters. And Steven had a huge freak out.
A full-blown meltdown.
I was going to do it, right?
I don't know. That's how you got roped into all of this, actually.
That's how I got into it.
Initially, your idea was to be behind the scenes. You were going to be...
I was just going to be the CEO.
The CEO, the manager, because, you do the thinking for me, and just to make sure that I don't look like a complete idiot and all that. And then out of desperation and complete, not even desperation, just devastation, I was like, you have to help me with this, please. You need to get on camera.
I did the intro video, but it was like 1 a.m. I put makeup on him. I don't know why we did that.
I thought I needed makeup. Makeup, in
and
film.
You went into a diva mode.
I did. I got very flamboyant. And then, I had a full-blown meltdown. Like, I can't do this. I think we still have those tapes somewhere. We'll have to do that. But it was bad. And I think that is, also something that as we get into podcasting, so many people don't think that they're going to need to be on video ever or have pictures taken or do photo shoots or do any of that stuff. And it's a necessity that,
it is a necessity
is to get onto other platforms
and get in front of the camera.
And get in front of the camera.
Another thing that we did that helped us to start thinking about our podcast in terms of making money was to create a Patreon page for our supporters, even though we didn't have a lot of supporters back then.
And now there's also Supercast, which is really cool. And they're in their early stages. But I think if we were starting now, we probably would have chosen Supercast. They just make it a little bit easier for people to support you. However, it's not totally ready for like different tiers and lots of different options that you can set up for your supporters yet. It's mostly just like this private RSS feed or this private podcast feed they get. But it's really cool. So that's the other thing.
Supercast and Patreon.
Supercast and Patreon, yep. Do you want to do the next header?
Yes.
Number 3, we started building our community early on.
So something that we did that helped us to start thinking about our podcast in terms of business was created our Facebook community. That was a game changer for us because when you're podcasting, you don't have that one-on-one interaction with your audience. It's very hard, so you have to leverage social media for that. And I don't think Twitter and Instagram, you can do the one-on-one and retweeting and all that, but I think Facebook just gives that infrastructure for you to build a community by creating a Facebook group.
Yeah,
so that's what we
groups.
did.
Yep.
And every week we were growing our Facebook group, and our listeners were finding us, and our YouTube subscribers, they would come to our Facebook group. So it was easy for us to, so this is how they look like. These people are my niche audience.
Yeah. And this is who likes us, and this is who we could serve, and this is who we could help.
And we started asking questions. Hey, what would you guys think if we launch this service? What would you guys think if we do this? What do you guys struggle with the most? How can we help you? That we created our pod audits.
Yes, our pod
audits.
That's
how the idea of having pod audits came about, was for us to serve and to try a service
and
with our Facebook
also
group.
To get better at podcast coaching and to challenge ourselves. And, people who volunteer their shows to be audited, we're just as nervous as they are to audit them.
Hey guys, we wanted to interrupt our episode with a mid-roll. This is something new we're trying out. Something that many podcasters don't think about is that they can start using mid-rolls to advertise their own services, products, or crowdfunding. So we thought we would try it out.
Yeah, and it's actually really easy to do. You just choose some mid-roll music and maybe a mid-roll in and out transition sound effect. I like computer glitches, whips, or even bubbles. And then record your ad. Spend some time mixing it in its own project or session, and then export it to a folder where you keep all your assets.
So, if you want to learn about mid-rolls, pre-rolls, post-rolls, segments, and how to launch a stellar podcast,
or beef up the one you already have,
and kill it on social media and build authority with your brand, we teach that and much more in our podcasting program, Pod Sound School Smart and Sexy Podcast Launch.
Check this episode's description for the waitlist link or go to podcastingsmart.com. But registration opens soon, so hurry up. Okay, now back to the episode. Number 4.
Invest in learning new skills.
So we invested and we continue to invest in coaching and courses, online courses.
And this is so important. If you don't get anything else out of this episode, this point is key for your success
as a podcaster, but then also when
and anything you do in life,
really. And it's just because these coaches and courses that you take and everything, these are experts, people who have been through it before, who have worked with clients, who have made mistakes, who have a lot to teach you.
Who can lay out a roadmap for you to follow step by step. And at the end of that roadmap, then you're going to have your end product. Instead of having to take all the pieces and putting the pieces together out of freebies and cheat sheets and YouTube videos
and everything else. And there's always something you overlook. That at least this way you save yourself from big critical mistakes that you would have made anyway. And you just
and
put
things
yourself
that you
ahead.
don't see.
Yeah, things that you don't see. And you're still, no matter how many courses and coaches you get, you're still going to stumble and fall and fail and embarrass yourself and make mistakes like crazy. And that's all part of the learning process. But this just fast forwards you in the future. It's like time traveling into the future.
Yeah. So some of the things that we did is that we signed up for a business coach because we wanted to start seeing our podcast as a business. And we took this program and it completely changed our mindset and the way that we saw our content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now now the way we see our content now is just a different way
Then we saw it
that
earlier.
we
Yeah.
saw it early on.
And it also really made us really start asking the questions and diving into market research and understanding who our market is and who needs our help and who we can serve and what our real why is and all of that stuff that sounds intuitive enough as it is. Like, yeah, I know who my ideal listener is, but it's not as intuitive until you actually just go through some of these courses. And then,
we have invested in courses, masterminds,
yeah,
social media courses.
and all the courses in education and schooling that you've had in the past is also something you could consider invest. I mean, your law school that you did and prepared you for this like crazy too. All of the writing skills that you learned as well have come in very handy. And, everything I learned throughout, and I took courses and I took training classes and things like that for my audio engineering and interning and studying under people and stuff like that too. It's the same with your podcast. And it is kind of, I think, backwards thinking to think, oh, well, when I'm ready or when I've done enough or when I've, can afford it or whatever, I'll get a coach because it's just, if you want to get somewhere fast, if you want to get to the destination a little bit faster, it's the best thing we've done.
Yeah, and I understand that it can be a little scary to make the investment, but I can honestly say that the money that we have invested in those masterminds and
in those courses
and programs, we have gained it back.
But easily gained it back. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are right now
without them, without our coaches and without people who are 100 steps, 10 steps ahead of you, and that can take you to the level where they are.
Yeah.
It was eye-opening for me. And I can tell you, I can be honest with you and say, I have learned from these people more that I have, like, more applicable skills, more make money skills than what I learned in school.
Yeah, I
in
say
school,
the same
they
thing.
don't teach you how to make money.
No, they teach you how to apply for jobs, right?
Yeah.
Or basically. So that was really big
true.
for us.
Another course we invested on was to put together our program, our Smart and Sexy Podcast Launch.
Yeah, so we take courses to learn how to make courses, right? And
because it's not as easy.
It's not as easy. And along the way, the whole process, you just take it with a grain of salt. You take what's useful for you. You learn not to make mistakes. And also, you're just providing a really good product for your audience.
So believe in yourself and make the investment.
And we're constantly, it's just part of our business plan. We're always in a course. You're in one right now. Either we're both in it together or I just sort of piggyback on Veronica's courses, which is nice.
That's the advantage of working from home.
Yeah, working from home or working with a duo.
With your significant other.
Yeah.
Are you a significant other?
I feel pretty significant. But if they're...
I don't like that significant other.
I know, it's a weird
It's like, if you're with the person, it's because it's significant. I'm not going to call that person insignificant.
My insignificant other. Ooh, that's really funny. I'm going to start calling you that just because that's great.
My insignificant other.
Oh, that's just my insignificant other. But...
okay, that takes us to the last point, which is to think...
Can you do this in a...
Oh.
Number 5. Think strategically.
Okay. I mean...
To translate, think strategically.
Even if you've been podcasting as a hobby or a way to give back to your community, some people are very precious about this too. They're like, I don't ever want to make money with my podcast. It's like a calling, and that's fine too. You don't necessarily need to make money from your podcast. You can make money from what your podcast brings you or where your podcast puts you, because it's going to put you in front of a big audience. And before you know it, all of a sudden you're a thought leader or you're an authority in your field. People are asking you to speak at events or come to their places. And then it's just...
Yeah, and you're going to be so sorry that you didn't have that mentality since the moment you started your podcast.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that
you didn't have
mentality.
that link there for your freebie to start capturing emails.
Yeah,
you
right
know?
from the very beginning
Right
of this great evergreen content
beginning.
you're making, right? So that's just is really the sooner that you can start adopting this idea of your podcast is a business and thinking of your podcast in terms of a business, that the better. And that doesn't mean that maybe it's because for some people business is boring. Maybe it's because for some people the hobby aspect of podcasting, it shouldn't be a job. If you get employed by it, suddenly it takes the fun out of it. And I could totally relate to that as like a musician in my musical days when I was going to, or even as an artist, or as a painter or as any type of creative person. You have to do your market research and make the art that your audience wants and all of that. And I think I can see how that could take some of the fun out of it. But instead of looking at it like that, if instead you look at the business side of it as being a creative side too, and how your values and your morals and your strong ideals that you have, how those can actually be your business. And you can be living as an example in that way, that you're making strides forward with like these new business ideals, this new way of doing business, that you're outrageous and fun.
It's a little bit of backward thinking, because so do you want to keep your 9 to 5 and then your hobby that brings you life and brings you joy, then you don't want to turn that into your full-time business, doing just a little bit of the administrative and all of that comes with having a business. That's the price you have to pay. But just think about how wonderful it will be if you can get to do what you love full time, and you can get to forget about your 9 to 5, go and talk to your shitty boss and tell him, I'm not working for you anymore.
Yeah, peace out.
Peace out.
And also just, because this, on that same thought, the reason we want it to be this like pure thing for us, like we want it to be this uplifting thing that isn't corrupted by money or our negative money mindsets or whatever. If it's a message that you want to get out, treating your podcast like a business is going to help you expand the message, get it out more, find your real market. Even if you're not making money, you're just using business practices, then you'll get that big audience that you want.
Yeah. So some of the things that changing the mindset will help you with getting more consistent with your content. If you start thinking about your podcast as a business, if you start thinking in the terms of, okay, I need to put a podcast episode out every week. My audience is relying on me for the information, I forgot about the word. The information, the entertainment, whatever I do with my podcast, then I'm just going to be more inclined to do it and to keep that momentum and keep that continuity, instead of being, this is just a hobby. I'm just going to do an episode here and an episode there and not do it anymore, and then come back a month later.
Yeah. So it's definitely helps you with consistency. And then the other thing is it helps you in organizing your workflow of how you produce your podcast to become more productive. Yeah,
we're in the middle of that.
Yeah, we're in the middle of doing that, where we're batch recording,
and we're doing batch recording.
So you can start batch recording. That's actually where we've always suffered, probably from the very beginning with our business, or struggled. Yeah, well, is staying organized.
Yeah,
and so we're just trying to crack the code on that as well too, and that's fun. And then setting short-term or long-term goals. This is a big one too. And like clients that we talk to and stuff, it's really hard to get a long-term goal out of them sometimes. They have a really hard time imagining how they would make money.
I know, it's just the human condition, I think.
Yeah.
We're so insecure. And we're constantly having to get that out of our clients. Like, okay, you can do this much. If you work hard, this is where you can get.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of perseverance. It does take a lot of market research, but the option to outsource is always there as you grow and to help you grow. And so, just think about some long-term goals. Like, what are your long-term goals? Is there a better city or country you'd like to live in? Or, goals that have nothing to do with podcasting, but just really having those in mind. And I don't think this is really life coaching stuff, because this, this episode is just about how we became a business. We were thinking strategically, and we did have long-term goals. We always knew from very early on, we knew we wanted to have courses. We knew we wanted to provide lots of different products and, you know,
We want it to be
membership
different and creative.
different and edgy and fun and creative and do business our way. And also, just provide a lot of value and training and membership programs and support to podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what the last one I think is
Not caring too much about the
About
metrics.
metrics.
Yes, when you think about your podcast or your content creation in terms of a business, you kind of forget about the metrics. The metrics are there to show you how much you have grown, but you're not as obsessed with the downloads, with the subscribers, with the followers. You're just focused on your own improvement and to transform your product into something profitable, which I think is just it's the way it should be.
Yeah, and then you get more
it-
into thinking about helping and serving and building a community and
like
engaging.
I have this 100, 200 listeners every week. Instead of thinking, I won't be able to even think about monetizing if I don't have thousands of downloads per episode. Then you start thinking, well, I have this 200 listeners. They're my super fans. Like, how can I start monetizing with this group of people? Should I have a Patreon page or a Supercast page? Should I start selling my services, my products? So that's why I think having that mentality will take you away from the metrics, which is a relief.
Yeah, and so really it's all just about changing your mindset. So to sum up this episode in just a quick takeaway, what we did that we also think that you should do is, number 1, invest time and money into yourself.
Number 2, adapt and expand to other platforms.
Yes. And 3, start building a community early on.
Number 4, invest in learning new skills.
Yes. And number 5, think strategically and change your negative money mindsets and change your mindsets to thinking about your podcast as a business.
Sí.
Okay.
Bueno.
Bueno pues. Bueno pues, ciao.
We've had enough of this nonsense.
And there you have it, Podski. What did you think of this episode? Slide into our DMs and let us know.
We make this show for you, and we'll love to learn your feedback. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Pod Sound School. Make sure you share a screenshot of this episode and tag us so we can give you some love on the Instas.
Yeah, and if you're interested in our feedback, we do pod audits most Thursdays live in our Facebook community, Podcasting for Bosses. These are 30-minute coaching sessions where we dissect your podcast, your social media, and your content. You'll find the sign-up sheet inside the group, podsoundschool.com/community.
And until next time,
Happy casting,
amigos!